Good morning. My name is Shannon Riley, and this is my presentation on understanding students with ADHD for my Educating Children with Exceptionalities class at Fort Hays State University. I thought it was important to first define what ADHD means, and actually that stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And ADHD is the most commonly diagnosed condition of children according to the Center for Disease and Control Prevention. The diagnostic term refers to the individuals who display patterns of inattention, impulsivity, and overactive behavior that interfere with their daily functioning. So we're going to see this daily functioning not only being in the school system, but also in their personal lives as well. In their home life, there's going to be a lot of chaos for these students, and you're going to see that at home and in the classroom. According to IDEA 2004, under what category are students with ADHD identified? Well, ADHD under IDEA does not have its own category, so it's actually put into a subcategory called other health impairments. And along that, in that subcategory, you're going to have other health problems such as asthma, students that have asthma, ADHD, diabetes, epilepsy, heart conditions, hemophilia, lead poisoning, leukemia, nephritis, rheumatic fever, sickle cell anemia, and Tourette's syndrome. And what they do is all these students show limited strengths, vitality, and alertness. And all of this together adversely affects their educational performance. So they're going to take all of these illnesses and they're going to put them all into one subcategory. How many students with ADHD are currently being served in the U.S.? Right now, approximately 7% of children are identified with having ADHD. A little side note just to say that boys are approximately 3 times more likely to experience ADHD than girls are. How has the number of students identified increased in recent years? Research suggests that the number has increased by 30% since the late 1990s. What are some of the reasons, reported reasons for this increase? Well, mostly would like to say that we now have an increased awareness and better diagnoses for ADHD. But there are other reported reasons, and that's contending culprits, which include poor nutrition, environmental toxins that can range from your food, the vaccines that we get, and agricultural chemicals. Another reason that's reported is possibly overdiagnosing symptoms. Some people feel that we overdiagnose. Maybe we overdiagnose too quickly. There's certain times in our lives that many of us show symptoms that we're going to talk about later on. So some people believe that we overdiagnose. Some people believe that kids don't play outside enough, that our society is more TV and computer and digital device centered, and we just don't play outside enough. And lastly, a lot of people believe that it's a lack of discipline in our world today, that we don't discipline our children enough. But the truth is that there are 3 causes of ADHD, and those are hereditary, structural differences in the brain, and other environmental causes. When we talk about hereditary, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you have parents that tended to show signs of ADHD when they were growing up, then your children are 2 to 8 times more likely to display symptoms. Typically, they say this comes from more of the father's side of the family, but science has also been able to identify multiple genes in people that have ADHD that are similar. Structural differences in the brain. Research has identified that most people who have ADHD all have structural and functional differences in their brain in terms of shape, thickness, and volume. And these variations of brain autonomy, functioning, and neurochemical factors seem to all involve areas of self-control in your brain. So that's another thing that people with ADHD seem to have in common. Environmental causes. Some people have prenatal factors in common, such as their parents drank and used drugs, so they had substance abuses. They may have smoked during pregnancy. Maybe they got terribly ill during pregnancy, a long and difficult labor. Maybe the baby was short of oxygen during birth. Many people also believe that a diet has a lot to do with it, like a diet high in sugar and preservatives that are in our food, or possibly allergies. If you're a person who suffers from food allergies and you eat those foods, it could cause these behavioral problems. What are the specific behavior characteristics of students with ADHD? Well, there are three behavioral characteristics, and those are called predominantly inattentive, predominantly hyperactive and impulsive, or combined. In predominantly inattentive type, you're going to see students who have attention problems. They have a problem keeping attention on details. They make careless mistakes. They do this in school and in social activities. Listening when someone speaks directly to them. You may think that student is paying attention in class, but really they're thinking about something or they're staring at the wall. Then this leads into problems following your instructions and being able to finish tasks because they weren't really paying attention when the teacher was telling them what to do. They have a lot of organizational issues, sustaining mental efforts when they're when they're trying to do something and they can't, they get a little frustrated, or the task takes very long, so it's hard on their mentality. They have a difficult time keeping track of their supplies, and they're very distractible and remembering daily activities. Something that they do daily, you might have to keep reminding them. Some students have to have step-by-step instructions of how to take a shower daily, or what to do when they get out of bed. Then we move on to predominantly hyperactive and impulsive types. And these are the kids in your classroom that have problems keeping their hands and their feet still, resisting. They like to run and climb. You're constantly having to remind them. They have a hard time during quiet and leisure activities. They seem to be always on the go. They talk a lot. They like to blurt out answers prematurely. They have a hard time waiting on their turn, and you'll find that they interrupt a lot in the class. And the last type is the combined type, and that is students who have characteristics of both. And that seems to be the most common when they have features of both. But what's most common with these students, of all students with ADHD, is they all face academic challenges, they all face social challenges, and they all have increased prevalence to internalizing behaviors and externalizing behaviors. So a lot of these students can seem sad. They have, they take it all in on themselves, and then others will just act out. So all students with ADHD have those problems. Do all students with ADHD demonstrate the same characteristics or degree of behavior? Well, I think we just discussed that, and the answer, of course, is no. And one of those ways is that there are rules set up, and in order to be diagnosed, children must exhibit 6 or more characteristics of what we just talked about. So, and that helps because at certain times, especially, well, I'll get on to that, I work in early childhood. At certain times in children's lives, they can display any of those types of characteristics. So it's important to be able to know that to get a diagnosis, they have to have 6 or more characteristics, so that children are not being diagnosed when they shouldn't be. Lastly, we're going to talk about effective class-wide interventions. And since I work in early childhood education, we're going to talk about how we do class-wide interventions in our classrooms. One thing that's very important in early childhood, preschool, child care centers is classroom structure. And we do that by clearly defining centers and play space. We pay attention to seating spaces, such as in circles or at tables. Some of the times we need to make sure that we have challenging students sitting near us or near a positive peer model. Having areas for calm down, routines established for daily activities, downtime that is limited, transition warnings given, rules that are taught, reviewed, and actively implemented, and clear expectations and instructions. Clearly define centers and play space. We do that by labeling everything. You'll walk into a preschool classroom and sometimes you think we over-label. But as long as we do this because it promotes familiarity to the children and it helps make them responsible for where they're at. So I have an example here of labeling centers. It also helps children to learn and recognize words. And it's also important that on these labels that we use first language. Seating space, especially in circle. Some of the ways, as this picture shows here on your right, we use carpet squares to define sitting spaces. So if you space them, it keeps everybody kind of in their own spot, and we talk about that. This is your space. We sit children across, maybe not next to a teacher, but near a teacher, somewhere where you can have some eye contact with that. We keep instructional time short. We provide wiggle breaks. That's important. Get up, do a little wiggle. Give a child a way to be actively involved. Make them be a helper. We teach listening strategies like 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, or 1, 2, 3, shh, quiet, or show me your listening ears. We also use nonverbal signals to get a kid back on task, and that can just be as easily as raising our hand or walking by a child and putting your hand on their shoulder. It brings them back to task. And we also praise and use incentives for good listening behavior and frequently. Providing a calm down area. This is an example. It provides a calm space. It's not intended for timeout. It's kind of like a fort area, a reading area, a quiet music area. It's just a place to be able to go and be able to center yourself again. Routines established for daily activities. It's important to provide structure and limits in a preschool classroom. Keep our downtime limited. We use first, then in language. First we're going to do calendar, then we're going to do weather. We create a lot of lists and tasks that we can all recite. We use pictures and cues, and we always give transition warnings, and that's very important. To even just say, hey kids, in 5 minutes we're going to be cleaning up. This gives everybody warning that something is coming next. Rules that are taught, reviewed, and actively implemented. Classroom rules are very important to listening bodies, raising hands, quiet mouths, walking feet, helping hands, caring hearts. It's important to have rules. It's important to review them quite often, and it's important to follow them. If you do not follow your rules, then it doesn't really make any difference if you have rules. Clear expectations and instructions. One of the ways we can do that is to speak more slowly to our students, to use first and then language like we talked about, break things into small pieces, and use differentiated instructions such as large and small groups or individual groups. This is my presentation on attention deficit disorder. I hope you learned some things from my presentation, and I thank you and have a great day.